After 137 years of mystery, fear, and speculation, we may finally know who Jack the Ripper really was. A series of breakthroughs, including AI-enhanced DNA analysis and long-hidden police notes, point to one man with chilling clarity, Aaron Kosminski. Once dismissed as a marginal suspect, he's now at the center of the most infamous unsolved case in history. Forensic science, historical records, and modern technology may have just solved one of the darkest crimes of all time. The foggy night of 1888. London's East End in 1888 was a maze of misery. In Whitechapel, over 76,000 people lived inside a cramped area under 1 square mile. The cobbled streets were narrow, poorly lit, and reeked of horse dung and coal smoke. Mist curled around gas lamps, cloaking alleyways in a constant fog. At night, the streets became a different world. Unseen figures moved quietly, and danger waited at every corner. That autumn, a figure emerged in the shadows. He didn't have a face, only a name: Jack the Ripper. He struck under cover of darkness, leaving no footprints, only horror. His first known victim, Marianne Nichols, was found dead on August 31st, 1888, throat slashed, body laid out in Buck's Row. Panic began to build as it became clear this wasn't an isolated murder. Then came Annie Chapman, found dead on September 8th, followed by Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, both killed on the same night, September 30th. The final and most gruesome was Mary Jane Kelly, killed inside her room on November 9th. Each crime became more violent, more deliberate. The killer wasn't rushing, he was evolving, building his signature. The city trembled, but he vanished into the mist each time. Newspapers seized the story, letters began arriving at police offices, many claiming to be from the killer. One letter dated September 25th was signed Jack the Ripper, giving the monster his infamous name. Reporters printed it. The public devoured it. Fear bloomed across London, but the man himself remained invisible, his legend growing with each attack. But behind the headlines, there were real people, real lives lost to the shadows of Whitechapel. The panic made the killer a myth, but the victims were mothers, daughters, and friends. In the next section, we look beyond the gore and into the stories of 5 women whose names became eclipsed by the mystery. Their stories, who they were, where they came from, and how they ended, tell us more than any theory ever will. The victims' lives. Marianne Nichols, 43, was a mother of 5. She had fallen on hard times, drinking to dull the pain. On the night of August 30th, she was turned away from her lodging house for lacking 4 pence. Hours later, she was found murdered, her throat slit, body left in Buck's Row. She was the first canonical victim, a woman reduced by time to a line in a police file. Annie Chapman, 47, once had a husband and a home, but illness and poverty pulled her into the streets. On September 8th, her mutilated body was discovered behind 29 Hanbury Street. Her uterus had been removed with disturbing precision. It wasn't just murder, it was targeted dissection. Annie died in the shadows, but her story was etched into the growing horror of the case. Elizabeth Stride, 44, was different. A Swedish immigrant, she spoke multiple languages and had worked as a cleaner. On September 30th, she was seen laughing with a man before being found dead with her throat cut. But something was off. There was no mutilation. Investigators believed the killer had been interrupted. Her life ended fast, and the Ripper moved on. Just an hour later, Catherine Eddowes, 44, was found in Mitre Square at 1:44 a.m. Her body showed signs of controlled violence. Her kidneys and uterus were taken, incisions clean and deliberate. The killer seemed to know anatomy. Catherine had been arrested earlier that night for drunkenness. She sang to the officers in her cell, then walked out into the night, never to return. Their names often vanish behind the term Ripper victims, but these women lived full, complex lives before becoming statistics. They walked the same streets we now only see in fog-filled photos. What happened to them wasn't just brutal, it followed a pattern. And that pattern is what makes this case so haunting. In the next section, we trace the killer's technique, how he moved, where he struck, and why some believe his methods reveal a deeper, darker purpose. The killer's method. Each murder followed a strange, calculated choreography. The locations, Bucks Row, Hanbury Street, Dutfield's Yard, Mitre Square, Miller's Court, were chosen with care. These places offered tight alleyways, shadowed corners, and multiple escape routes. In a city as crowded as London, the killer found spaces of silence. He knew the streets better than the police. Most attacks occurred between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., soaring just outside the standard 15-minute patrol gaps of the police. It was a precise window, just enough time to kill and vanish. Forensic reviews suggest each murder was executed in 5 to 10 minutes. No sounds, no cries, just sudden violence. His rhythm was near mechanical. The mutilations escalated. Marianne Nichols had her throat cut. Annie Chapman had organs removed. Catherine Eddowes was dissected. And Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim, was mutilated beyond recognition. Her organs were spread across her room. This wasn't blind rage, it was calculated ritual. The killer grew more confident, more brutal. Some experts noted the killer seemed to understand human anatomy. Cuts were made along specific lines. Organs were taken with apparent care. This wasn't clumsy butchery, it may have been surgical. Combined with the careful timing and escape routes, it painted a picture not of madness, but of control. Jack the Ripper wasn't just violent, he was methodical. Understanding how the Ripper moved helps us understand how he remained unseen. But while the streets were watched and panic rose, law enforcement scrambled without results. In the next section, we step inside the investigation. Confused police forces, misleading letters, and a city pushed to the edge. Because the biggest mystery of all wasn't just who the killer was, but how he vanished and why no one could stop him. The investigation. The hunt for Jack the Ripper was unlike any in Victorian England. Two police forces shared jurisdiction over Whitechapel: the Metropolitan Police, led by Commissioner Sir Charles Warren, and the City of London Police. But their cooperation was poor. Boundaries split investigations, evidence sharing was delayed, and detectives often worked blind. The lack of unified command weakened their response from the beginning. Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline, one of Scotland Yard's finest, led the ground investigation. He took thousands of statements, pursued leads, and interviewed numerous suspects. But the killer always stayed ahead. Then came the Dear Boss letter, postmarked September 25, 1888. Written in red ink, it was signed Jack the Ripper and joked about cutting off ears. Though likely a hoax, it ignited a media firestorm. For the first time, a serial killer had a public identity. Fear spread quickly. Whitechapel residents formed vigilante patrols, frustrated with police failures. Newspapers speculated wildly, and tensions rose against the local Jewish community, fueled by anti-Semitic rumors, and one chilling chalk message found near a murder site. The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. The government ordered it wiped away before photos could be taken. The public wanted answers. The police had none. The killer's final known act, the murder of Mary Jane Kelly on November 9th, should have ended the spree with answers. But there was no arrest, no trial, only silence. The case slowly faded. In 1891, an internal memo listed top suspects, but none were ever confirmed. The Ripper became a ghost, a story that lingered because it ended with nothing at all. As the streets quieted, the mystery remained. The lack of conviction wasn't for lack of suspects. There were hundreds. But the evidence, thin and corrupted, left Scotland Yard lost in the fog. In the next section, we look at the suspects, from disturbed locals to mysterious foreigners, and the shaky clues that made some names stand out. Because the myth of Jack the Ripper wasn't just built on horror, it was built on a question. Could we ever be certain who he really was? 100 suspects. By 1894, Scotland Yard listed Montague John Druitt, Michael Ostrog, and Aaron Kosminski as their main suspects. Each man fit parts of the profile. Druitt was a barrister and teacher who died by suicide shortly after the final murder. Ostrog was a violent thief. Kosminski, a Polish immigrant, had mental health struggles and lived in Whitechapel during the killings. But none could be definitively linked. Over the years, the suspect list ballooned. Some named Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria. Others claimed it was the artist Walter Sickert or American killer H.H. Holmes. Theories became stranger: time travelers, masons, or satanic doctors. Dozens of books were written, each offering a final solution to the case, but they lacked hard proof. Part of the problem? In 1888, forensic science was still primitive. Fingerprinting wasn't standard. DNA testing didn't exist. Even blood typing wouldn't emerge for decades. So investigators relied on descriptions, witness statements, and assumptions about behavior. The killer, it seemed, used this to his advantage, blending into a city of shadows. And then there was society itself. The victims, poor, often sex workers, weren't protected. Their deaths drew attention, yes, but rarely respect. They were seen as disposable. The press sensationalized them, but few in power truly fought for justice. The Ripper mystery remained not just because of lack of evidence, but because the victims' lives were already being forgotten before they were ended. One suspect, though, kept returning in modern books and police archives: Aaron Kosminski, a disturbed young man with access to blades, a known presence in Whitechapel, and a name etched in multiple police files. In the next section, the story shifts to the 21st century, where a piece of cloth, a DNA test, and a controversial scientist reopened the coldest of cold cases. Could a shawl and a genetic trace finally reveal the Ripper's true face? The shawl and the DNA claim. In 2006, businessman Russell Edwards purchased a silk shawl at auction, said to have been found near the body of Catherine Eddowes, the Ripper's fourth canonical victim. Though the chain of evidence was unverified, Edwards believed it was authentic. In 2014, he partnered with Dr. Jari Louhelainen, a molecular biologist, to conduct DNA testing on the shawl. Their tests focused on mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, inherited through the maternal line. They claim matches between genetic traces on the shawl and descendants of Catherine Eddowes and Aaron Kosminski. It was explosive. Newspapers declared the mystery solved. "Jack the Ripper identified by DNA," headlines screamed. Edwards released a book. The public was gripped again 137 years later. But doubts surfaced quickly. First, the provenance. There's no official record confirming the shawl was ever at the 1888 crime scene. Second, contamination. Over a century of handling, storage, and display likely altered any trace evidence. Finally, the science. mtDNA can't uniquely identify an individual. It links families, not people. Top geneticists, including Sir Alec Jeffreys, inventor of DNA fingerprinting, criticized the study's methods and conclusions. The research was not published in a high-tier, peer-reviewed forensic journal. It lacked independent replication. To many experts, the findings were intriguing, but far from definitive. Kosminski remained a top suspect, but the DNA didn't clinch it. Still, the Kosminski theory wouldn't fade. From asylum records to immigration files, his life aligned with the killings in eerie ways. The story of a disturbed barber roaming Whitechapel with razors, undetected then institutionalized, fits the Ripper's arc. In the next section, we explore the man himself. Who was Aaron Kosminski? What did the police believe about him in 1888? And could a name written in dusty ledgers finally match the legend of London's greatest mystery? Aaron Kosminski. Aaron Kosminski was born on September 11, 1865, in Kłodawa, in what is now Poland. He emigrated to London with his family in the early 1880s, part of the wave of Eastern European Jews fleeing pogroms and poverty. Like many, they settled in Whitechapel, already a dense, immigrant-heavy part of London's East End. He worked as a barber, a job that required sharp blades and an eye for precision, skills not lost on investigators after the Ripper murders began. By 1888, Kosminski was 23 years old and reportedly began exhibiting signs of severe mental illness. According to asylum records, he suffered from auditory hallucinations, believed food was being poisoned, and refused to wash. His family eventually had him institutionalized in 1891, where he lived until his death in 1919. Several records show he remained largely nonviolent inside the asylum, but this hasn't stopped theories that he was once capable of brutal, calculated violence. Still, a suspect without proof is just a name. Forensic science has become the great equalizer in modern crime solving, and Jack the Ripper's mystery didn't stay buried. When technology caught up with legend, scientists returned to the evidence with a new lens. But could even cutting-edge tools like DNA really close a case that had eluded the world's best detectives for over a century? In the next section, we examine the science itself and why so many experts remain skeptical of the DNA breakthrough. Skepticism and scientific critique. The DNA analysis that linked Aaron Kosminski to the Ripper case relied on mitochondrial DNA, a useful but limited tool in forensic science. Unlike nuclear DNA, which can uniquely identify an individual, mitochondrial DNA only confirms maternal lineage. That means a match could link someone to a family, but not necessarily prove they were at a specific crime scene. In the Kosminski case, this is a critical flaw, especially when the sample is more than 130 years old. The shawl used in the analysis had no official documentation placing it at Mitre Square, where Catherine Eddowes was murdered. There's no mention of it in police records, coroner's notes, or crime scene inventories. For over a century, it passed through private hands, reportedly stored in a family trunk, susceptible to handling and environmental contamination. In forensic terms, this severely weakens its value as a reliable source of crime scene DNA. The world of science hesitates, but public interest surges. Victims' families want closure. Authors, journalists, and documentarians keep the hunt alive. And as the evidence accumulates, even when incomplete, momentum builds. Could an inquest still be held? Should the name Jack the Ripper be retired and Aaron Kosminski be remembered instead? In the next section, we turn to the growing movement demanding recognition, not just for the killer, but for the women he murdered. The modern campaign and calls for closure. In recent years, a quiet campaign has gained momentum. Descendants of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's most brutalized victims, have called for a formal inquest into her death, reopened with modern forensic standards. If authorities confirm that Kosminski is the man behind the killings, her family believes history should reflect it. They argue that even after 137 years, the justice system has a responsibility to provide closure, if the evidence supports it. The media landscape has helped their cause. With true crime podcasts, documentaries like The Ripper File, and online communities dedicated to solving cold cases, public engagement has never been higher. In 2019, Russell Edwards, the man behind the DNA claims, again pushed for official recognition of Kosminski as the Ripper, citing what he claimed was a 100% match. While that number is misleading in a scientific context, it nonetheless reignited the debate. One name may solve the mystery, but it cannot undo the violence. As science and history converge, the Ripper case stands as more than a whodunit. It's a mirror showing us how society views violence, memory, and justice. In the final section, we ask the deepest question: what is it about this case that won't let go? Why does Jack the Ripper endure? And what does our obsession with him say about us? Why it matters and the legacy that lingers. Jack the Ripper is more than a killer. He's a symbol of something unresolved. His identity may be close to confirmed, his methods dissected, and his crimes mapped. But the fascination lingers because his story touches deeper nerves. Urban fear, anonymity, violence against women, and the failure of institutions to protect. In Victorian London, those themes simmered beneath the surface. In 2025, they still resonate. The forensic revolution of the 20th and 21st centuries gave us tools the Ripper-era police never had. Yet even now, with DNA and AI, we're reminded of science's limits. Contamination, lost records, and the passage of time blur the line between truth and myth. This case may be the best example of how even the most modern tools cannot always fix a broken past. What remains most vital is how we talk about the victims. Their names, Mary, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, Mary Jane, should be on every headline. They lived. They fought poverty, illness, stigma. Their stories are worth more than the man who took their lives. Whether or not Kosminski is ever officially named as the killer, their memory is what history should preserve. And so the final legacy of Jack the Ripper might not be about catching a killer, but about who we choose to remember and how. If we focus only on the knife, we miss the lives it cut short. But if we remember the women, their stories, and the lessons history offers, then perhaps the mystery becomes more than a puzzle. It becomes a path to justice. Even 137 years too late, Jack the Ripper's name may finally be known, but the meaning behind the case goes far deeper. It's a story of forgotten victims, failed institutions, and a society struggling with violence in its shadows. If Aaron Kosminski was indeed the killer, history can now close a long open wound. Yet the case still echoes through time, reminding us that truth, however late, demands attention, respect, and above all, remembrance of those whose lives were lost in the fog of 1888.